From hunter-gatherers to farmers, how did the development of agriculture change daily life in the Neolithic Age? Food supply. During the Paleolithic Age, people obtained food by hunting animals and gathering plants. But hunting and gathering did not provide a very stable or dependable food supply. Wild plants and animals grew scarce when people stayed in one area for too long, and hunting was dangerous. Hunters were often injured or killed. Neolithic Age. Gradually, people discovered they didn't have to depend on hunting and gathering. Instead of gathering wild plants, they could plant seeds and harvest crops. Over time, they learned which seeds produced the most crops in the areas where they lived. Early farmers also learned how to domesticate animals, raising and using them for their own purposes. They raised sheep, goats, and cattle for their meat. They got milk from both goats and cattle. They used mules to carry heavy loads and pull plows. Together, the growing of crops and the domestication of animals are called agriculture. The Neolithic Age began with the invention of agriculture. For the first time, people had a stable food supply. Let's explore why this change is one of the most important advances in all of history. Shelter. During the Paleolithic Age, people had lived in caves or rough tent-like structures. These shelters were temporary because hunter-gatherers often moved to follow wild animals or to find new plants to eat. Neolithic Age. The first great change brought about by agriculture was the development of permanent shelters. In many areas, people packed mud bricks together to build round or rectangular houses. Sometimes they added stones and tree branches to strengthen the walls and roof. The houses had openings high in the walls. People probably climbed a ladder to reach the openings and enter the house. Inside were several rooms. Places to store food were built into the floor. Pits for cooking were dug into the floor and lined with clay. People may have filled the pits with water and dropped on hot stones to make the water boil for cooking. The development of permanent shelters was important in several ways. Houses gave people protection from harsh weather and wild animals. They made life more comfortable. They allowed new ways of cooking food, and living in permanent shelters allowed people to form larger communities. Communities. In Paleolithic times, small bands of about 20 to 60 people of family members wandered from place to place in search of food. They could not settle in one place for too long, so they were unable to form communities. Neolithic Age. Along with permanent shelters, farming allowed people to form larger communities. Once people began farming, they could settle down near their farms. As a result, villages and towns grew up, like those at Jericho and Çatalhöyük. Living in communities allowed people to organize themselves more efficiently. They could divide up the work of producing food and other things they needed. While some workers grew crops, others built new houses and made tools. Village dwellers also learned to work together to do a task faster. For example, toolmakers could share the work of making stone axes and knife blades. By working together, they could make more tools in the same amount of time. With their basic needs met, people had more time and energy for other activities. They could invent new ways of making their life safer and more comfortable. Larger communities could also defend themselves more easily against enemies. The Neolithic town of Jericho, for example, was protected by strong stone walls. All these changes helped populations to grow where farming villages developed. Neolithic houses made of packed mud helped people stay warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Neolithic villages were the first real communities. People were able to cooperate as they worked and defended their homes. Jobs. In Paleolithic times, people's main job was finding enough food to survive. Women took care of the children and gathered food nearby, while men hunted animals. Neolithic Age. Having a stable food supply allowed people to develop new kinds of jobs during the Neolithic Age. With farms to provide their food, Neolithic people could develop more specialized skills. A good example is the town of Çatalhöyük, which dates back to about 6000 BCE. Historians believe that the townspeople worked in a number of different jobs. Besides farmers, there were weavers, basket makers, tool makers, and traders. Focusing on one job allowed people to get better at their work. In Çatalhöyük, farmers learned how to grow more than 14 kinds of plants. Clothing makers developed a way to spin and weave. They wove natural fibers such as wool and linen into comfortable cloth. In some regions, people mined flint so that stoneworkers could create sharper tools. Neolithic people didn't just want to survive. They wanted to make themselves and their surroundings more beautiful. They decorated their pottery and baskets with geometric shapes. Stoneworkers learned to polish stones to make shiny jewelry and mirrors. House builders added special rooms to honor their gods and goddesses they believed in. The development of different kinds of jobs encouraged people to become highly skilled at their crafts. This led to new and better ways of doing things. Furthermore, different jobs created much more variety in community life. Trade. Paleolithic hunter gatherers rarely traded with other groups. They usually used only the plants, animals, and other resources they found nearby. They needed all of the resources they had. Neolithic Age. Another major change in Neolithic times was the growth of trade. Once people settled in towns and villages, trade became more common. People trade to get resources they do not have in their own area. As Neolithic people became more skilled in their crafts, they wanted materials to improve the strength and beauty of the things they made. Getting those resources became the job of traders. Traders often traveled hundreds of miles to find what they wanted. They crossed mountains on foot, rode donkeys across deserts, and sailed the Mediterranean Sea on ships. People in Neolithic communities had the time and tools to create works of art. This hand axe is made from obsidian. Neolithic traders in the Mediterranean region prized this resource. It was found mostly in the area that is now Turkey. For what were the traders searching? Popular items included flint and obsidian. Obsidian is a black glass from volcanic mountains. Craftspeople used it to make knife blades, arrowheads, and mirrors. People also traded for beauty products, like shell ornaments and a red ore called hematite. Women rubbed hematite on their lips and cheeks to make them redder. The growth of trade allowed people to make use of more resources. It also brought them into contact with people from distant places. These contacts helped spread ideas and knowledge around the ancient world. In summary, you learned how the development of agriculture changed people's lives between the Paleolithic and Neolithic age. During the Paleolithic age, people lived as nomads, obtaining their food by hunting animals and gathering plants. Gradually, people discovered they could grow crops and domesticate animals. These two developments are called agriculture. Agriculture marked the beginning of the Neolithic age. As people began to farm, they built permanent shelters and formed communities. Towns and villages grew up near farms. Living in communities allowed people to improve how they lived and worked. They created new jobs and traded for the resources they needed.